clearly there's uncertainty. People in good faith are trying to do securities analysis and they're not understanding how to do it. That's a problem.
So apart from clearly defining when is a security not a security and not pursuing people retrospectively, what are the other big gaps that you see in your regulatory framework? I mean, one that's been identified here is a lot of debate, and had not very good on this session on it recently, is about the definition of property, and there are some gaps in how you define property in the digital space. I wonder, what gaps do you see in America?
Well, I think 2022 taught us a lot of lessons around, the fact that crypto intermediaries have a lot of the same problems as non-crypto intermediaries. And I think so. One could argue, I think there's a lot the industry can do itself to put in some protections, to be more skeptical, to do much more introspection. But one could argue you should have a federal regulatory framework that covers the big crypto intermediaries. And I think that does probably require more legislation to decide who should be doing that regulation. I would argue that looking at tokens themselves as securities is often problematic. Sometimes a token carries with it an ownership interest in something, in which case it looks more like a traditional equity security, or it carries with it some stream of payments that may make it look like a security. But even if something is sold, a token is sold as part of a securities offering, it's not clear to me that the token itself would be the security. And so I think another gap is, you could argue there's a need for a disclosure regime to address information asymmetries in the person or group of persons who's issuing a token and the people buying it. We could put some kind of disclosure regime in place to address that information asymmetry. Now, whether that is through registering with the SEC, or whether that's through having the exchanges put in some kind of a disclosure mechanism so that tokens they're trading, they make sure that there's disclosure that goes with them, that remains to be decided. But I would argue that's a gap. I put out several years ago a safe harbor which would be designed to address that information asymmetry problem. There are different ways you could approach it, but I would argue that that's a gap.
And there are...
Well, the case against Ripple by the United States SEC started 2.5 years ago, so it's certainly been a bit frustrating and slow, but the good news is we're at the end of that journey. And while others in the crypto industry might be the beginning of that journey, the silver lining for Ripple has been that we're kind of at the end. Sometime, I would say, between the next 2 and let's say 6 months, I expect a resolution. The judge in the United States has been fully briefed. She has the decision on her plate. A federal judge can operate on whatever timeline in this case, she would like. But I'm optimistic we're going to see resolution, I believe, before the end of Q3.
What's up, guys? The SEC is under fire again for, as you guessed it, lack of regulatory clarity. I hate to sound like a broken record, but come on. When will the SEC step up their game and finally create the rules and regulations that we can use? The worst part about it is that the SEC took Ripple to court for breaking rules in a field that doesn't have any regulations to govern it. At this point, getting a certificate of registration from the SEC doesn't hold any weight. You might as well light up a cigarette with that paper. Anyway, before I get all worked up, let's roll that intro and get into today's hot story. As always, welcome to Money Side, your favorite crypto channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you get updates when we drop new videos. And don't forget to smash that like button, and you can always leave a comment or a question in the section below.
How would you characterize the crypto regulatory environment in the Middle East if you had to compare it to what we're seeing in the US right now?
I think it's just light. It's day and night, right? So what I can see, because I experience mainly the UAE, I think the regulators are very open. You can come up with an idea, have a dialogue with the regulator, agree on the way forward, and you're able to move forward with very quick speed. Also, you're able to very quickly mobilize in terms of team. You're able to scale up and then constantly go back to the regulator if the model changes in some way. So this is this healthy two-way dialogue that's creating the fertile ground for companies to grow in the Web3 space.
So what's your message to the SEC chair as you sit here in the UAE and in Dubai announcing an expansion of your business to this region, given the state of regulation in the United States right now?
Who? No, I'm kidding. All right, so look, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. I find it as a company that started in the United States and as someone who's a U.S. citizen, it's sad. Like, I have sadness about this. The U.S. is getting past not just a little bit, but by a lot. And you know what? The tough thing about this is you have a country that I think has put politics ahead of policy. And, you know, that's not a good decision if you're trying to invest in the economy. You're seeing it, you know, certainly here in the UAE with VARA, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, certainly what's happened recently in Europe with MiCA. The United States is definitely stuck. And, you know, Ripple, the case with the SEC, we will spend, the first time I've shared this publicly, by the time it's said and done, we will have spent $200 million defending ourselves against a lawsuit, which from its very beginning, people were like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. You have video footage of the chair of the SEC as a professor at MIT saying 75% of these digital assets are commodities. And now he says they're all securities because he's the head of the SEC and he's seeking power and he's putting power ahead of sound policy to grow an economy in the United States. Blockchain technologies are being invested in and pursued in the entrepreneurship outside the United States. And one of the first pieces of advice I give entrepreneurs when they come and ask me, getting something started, I'll say, if I were you, I would not start in the United States. And I think there's a lot of US-based companies and even US public companies that would agree with that.
Ripple just expanded to Dubai. With all the stories we hear about the UAE, I wouldn't be surprised if this company chooses to shift to the United Arab Emirates. Dubai is an extremely friendly environment when compared to the US. And if I was Brad Garlinghouse, I'd honestly think twice about moving base to the UAE. Frankly, the only company that was cozy with Gensler was FTX, and well, we all know how that turned out. More importantly, Brad Garlinghouse has always consulted with the SEC, but the idea that Ripple might be selling securities never came up in those meetings, which is totally absurd. I think it's high time that we call out the SEC for their BS. What they are actually doing is completely unethical, and it seems that they are not protecting anyone except their personal image and self-interest. Here's a tweet we should all pay attention to. Ripple XRP fam, Rep. Brian Steele is up to the task. Let's make it happen, Captain. I think it's time for Congress to get working on digital asset rules because the current regulation by enforcement practice is not working. Last month, we asked SEC Chairman Gensler for his view on digital assets, and candidly, we didn't learn a lot. I didn't. We didn't hear a path forward for digital assets. Perhaps the only thing we learned from Chair Gensler is that he has not traded digital assets himself. We didn't hear a path forward for digital assets.
For 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I thank both our chairmans and both our ranking members for calling today's hearing. It's great to see agriculture and financial services come together to address a really big challenge. Why? Because I think it's time for Congress to get to work on digital asset rules, because the current regulation by enforcement practice is not working. Last month, the Financial Services Committee, we asked the SEC Commissioner, Chairman Gensler, for his view on the future of digital assets regulations. And candidly, we didn't learn a lot. We didn't hear a path forward for digital asset regulation. Maybe one of the only things we learned was that Chairman Gensler's never traded a digital asset himself. We don't know what Chairman Gensler's plans are. There's not clear rules in front of us. And regulation by enforcement doesn't work. And the come in and register black box served, the register by black box is serving to chill the digital assets innovation. I don't think we can afford as a country to cede regulation to other countries. I'm concerned that it's going to move innovation outside the United States, move it overseas, costing Americans jobs and putting U.S. retail investors ultimately at a disadvantage. And I think this hearing demonstrates that Congress is ready to do the job.
The SEC doesn't really understand or appear to grasp how the crypto system works, and Gary Gensler should not be leading this body. I think that it's time that we have new management before this case is closed so that the future can be as bright as it was before. All in all, Ripple will still win because the facts are on their side. But can you imagine the amount of time, money, and effort they have had to deal with to defend their stand? Brad Garlinghouse should definitely seek justice for this court case and demand that the SEC finally clarify the rules that govern the crypto world. As always, do your own research and always trade safely, guys. Please keep in mind, we're not a licensed financial advisor. All videos on this channel are intended for entertainment purposes only. Let us know what you think in the comments section below, and let's have a conversation. Thank you as always for watching. Don't forget to like this video. Please click on that subscribe button below and turn on notifications so you get informed when we drop new video. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next Money Side.